Hello. Thank you for joining us for an all-new BizBash webinar. I'm Nicole Peck, Executive Vice President of BizBash, and today we are so pleased and excited to have Pierre Metrailler, CEO of SpotMe, and Mitra Sorrells, Technology Editor and Orlando Bureau Chief here at BizBash, join us as today's presenters. Pierre joined SpotMe in 2001 when a passionate group of pioneers were developing an innovative solution that would facilitate face-to-face interactions at meetings and conventions and conferences. Pierre established the company professional services model, grew the business, and architected the next-generation SpotMe technology platform, pivoting the brand from a proprietary hardware rental business to a pure software product. Today, the company has transitioned its product and service lines to mobile apps, expanded across the globe, and expanded its offerings to engagement platforms for events and teams. Mitra Sorrells joined BizBash in 2010 and is the Technology Editor and Orlando Bureau Chief. Most of her work is focused on technology products of interest to planners, as well as uncovering innovative examples of how technology can improve the event experience. She also writes about interesting events that take place in Central Florida and the new venues around the region. Today we're going to discuss the 4 event trends set to take over in 2018. Before we get started, though, 2 small housekeeping notes. Be sure to tweet your webinar feedback with the hashtag #SmarterEvents to @BizBashLive and @SpotMe. We'll also be hosting a Q&A at the end of the webinar, so please submit your questions on the box on the lower left-hand side of your screen, the area that says questions, and we'll be able to see those and then pose them to our speakers at the end of the webinar. Without further ado, I'd love to introduce our incredible speakers, Pierre Metrailler and Mitra Sorrells.
Hi, everyone, and Nicole, thank you so much for the warm welcome. I'm really excited to be part of what I know is going to be a great discussion about a very timely topic. Let's jump right in. So the first trend that we are seeing is personalization. And, I certainly think it's no surprise since we have all grown accustomed to seeing personalization in other aspects of our lives. When I log on to Amazon, I see suggestions of products that I might like based on past purchases. When I go onto Netflix, I see suggestions of shows based on my past viewing habits. So whether it's a small conference or a large trade show, our attendees want to feel like their presence is valued. And one of the best ways to communicate that is to create an experience or moments during that overall experience that feel as if they have been personalized to their interests and their needs. And the wonderful thing is that now technology is creating opportunities and capabilities to really understand attendees and create those custom experiences for them. In fact, you're really able to track your attendees from the moment they start to explore your website until the moment they leave your event.
So absolutely, Mitra. Personalization is all about crafting a tailored and unique experience for your event. And that is based on what you know about your attendees. And I'm not just talking about personalizing one event, but rather to create 200 or 3,000 different experiences for the people attending that event. So what are we trying to achieve with personalization? Because everyone is talking about it, but at the end of the day, we want to ensure that every individual has a meaningful and lasting impression of your event. But in practice, our first goal is to make sure that we tell every participant that they matter and they feel good so that they open up. And also, as a second objective, is to create surprises, serendipity, and inspire our participants. This is all about creating a learning attitude. So there are 2 areas you can explore. The first is that you can create personas. And this is a typical marketing scheme, but you can think about the different type of participants and their goals and create fictional characters. So if you would have a software user conference, you would have Scott, the VP of sales. You would have Alison, the C.E.O. from a client company. You would have Peter, the account manager, and you would have Glenn, the BDM from a channel partner who is exhibiting. And all those 4 personas, they have very different needs and very specific objectives. Now, the second angle you should take is to think about journeys and touch points. And a lot of people talk about personalized experiences. We do prefer the idea of personalized journeys. This thing is in motion. So you can map your participant journey from the first marketing email to registration, to app onboarding, to transfers, to on-site reg, to session attendance tracking, to audience response, and finally to post-meeting feedback. And these are all touch points that you can map and ask yourself the question, is this relevant to all my personas? How can I amplify a specific touch point for one persona and eliminate it altogether for others? And this is what personalization is about.
Yeah, well, certainly that's very helpful information. I think the days of assuming and treating our attendees as if they are just one homogeneous mass are long over. People just don't want to be generalized like that. And they may be gathering for a common purpose or a common interest, whether that's a gala, a trade show, a conference, a product launch. But not every person will have the same goals and interests, and therefore they shouldn't have the same experience.
All right, so how do we implement this? Well, Mitra, it's very simple. It's just 3 words. It's use the data. And, well, what data, would you ask? We have 2 types of data. We can use insights that are based on your personal data, on who those people are, and this could be job titles, this could be questions that you ask those people, this could be country of origin, this could be any personal preferences or traits, or you can leverage behavior data that are generated by participants, and this is what people do. And this is all about tracking where they went into the app, what kind of content they did request, and what are the interactions they're having with other participants. So 2 types of data, 2 options. And the first one is what we call personalization, the most basic one, which you can use for tailoring content to specific individuals. If you take the example of a mobile app, in this case, you will be creating personalized programs, personalized itineraries. You will tailor the user interface. You will have a personalized menu of options. You would have a tailored home screen experience. And for example, one of our financial services client, QBE, they have implemented a 6-week sequence prior to the event. Each week, the app home screen would have a different content based on the person profile, on his seniority, function, responsibility, but also based on the financial news that occurred during the past 72 hours. And the goal here was to create a personalized experience that put people in a learning posture. Now, after you've tried personalization, you want to move it a little bit further, and this is when it's time to try recommendation. And this is the science of using data to influence decisions and action based on your behavior or on other people's behavior. And you can do recommendations on sessions that you should attend. You could do recommendation on people you should be meeting, or you could go even further and build an Amazon-grade recommendation system. If you take annual meetings for medical societies, typically 4,000 posters are presented, and yet our data shows that in average, participants do only take the time to study less than 10 of them. And with a recommendation system in place, based on the sessions that you have registered to, based on the navigation and the content that you have consumed in the app can suggest the most relevant posters for you to review, and resulting in about 25% increase in content consumption. Now, this means that you have to collect the data, and you need to make sure that you have the data in the first place. So make sure when you're registering your participant to ask them as many questions as possible, including their interest and their objective. This has several privacy concerns, but if you disclose the intent, this is something that participants are usually quite happy to provide you with. This is also data that you need to organize. You need to tag your content. You need to tag your sessions with the same taxonomy that you are using for your data collection. And one last example I'd like to conclude on that is SAP has been mixing personalization and recommendation. So, for example, what they do is that they have personalized agenda with predefined sessions that are mandatory based on your role and your region. But in addition to that, people are encouraged to augment their personalized agenda based on session recommendation. And this is an optimal balance to achieve the best results.
Wonderful. Okay, well, I'm sure, and we may get some great questions based on all that wonderful information you've just shared there. So let's move on now to the next trend, and that is immersive experiences. So certainly this is something that we are seeing more and more, events creating engaging, immersive experiences that are relevant to their attendees. The fact is people's attention is more fragmented than ever. They're walking around your event with their phones out, they're checking email, they're doing work, maybe they're playing games. So the challenge is really greater than ever to create an experience that captures and holds their attention. And of course, there are endless ways to engage with your audience, but it's important to understand what will work for them. This is really a great opportunity to take those personalization tactics and get the attention of your guests. And technology is certainly creating opportunities to engage people both visually and emotionally.
Well, Mitra, what we see is that business leaders do invest in events because they want to engage with their audience. They want to connect with their employees, with their managers, with their customers and partners, and they want to create a dialogue. But before creating a dialogue, you need your participants to open up. You need them to change their mindset, especially if you've been treating them, with a 45-minute death by PowerPoint. So to do that, you need to trick their brains. And you can trick their brains by developing emotionally, visually, and physically intensive experiences. So when engaging your audience, you need to make it authentic. You need to make it instant and layered. And that is something that is not flat, but dimensional, with things to be discovered in a variety of ways. So, for example, what we have on the slide is TD Bank that fosters conversation with word clouds, with debate, with live polling, and moderated Q&A streams to inspire participants. With 600 people seated in a room, and this is what we call mixed reality. Mixed reality is a great way to achieve your objective. And with mixed reality, you will be blending your live screen, that big screen up in the room, with instant responses and feedback received from participants. And you are, in effect, replacing your static slide content with user-generated content that you can immediately reflect on your screens. And this is key. The visual aspect of the experience is important. It needs to be beautiful, impressive, and meaningful. Now, what you are doing is that you are mixing the virtual universe of 600 people reflecting on their impressions on their phones and the physical world where these impressions are crystallized on a word cloud. And this is an experience that everyone will remember.
Yeah, certainly there's nothing worse than filling a schedule with programs or activations or components that have been created simply to fill the space or time. I think, most of our attendees are smart enough, they figure that out and are turned off by that. And they are giving you their time, their attention, and in some cases, their money. So it's important to remember to value that. We see gamification being used, and it can be useful, but it's important to make sure that those games have some sort of connection to the overall program or concept that everyone is gathered together for. And one of the most common ways to create an immersive experience, of course, is with virtual reality or augmented reality. And yes, they are incredibly cool, but you do have to still ask, are they adding value to your events?
All right, so what can you do or what can I do? Well, first, you have invested money in this extra wide, super duper screen. And yet, what most people do is that they put up slides. Well, we would say just use it. Forget your presented slides. Use your screen to reflect your participants' inputs, insights, and behaviors. Leaderboards, dashboards, heat maps, debates, word clouds, social graph, consensus map, rating matrix. These are innovative visualizations that will crystallize your participant attention and that will position you as forward thinkers. You can connect your participant apps to your giant screen and use it as a mixed reality reflector of your participant voices and minds. Now, what if you could do it without that big screen? Think of all the constraints that are attached to it. You need a dark room, you need a fixed seating format. Well, with everyone carrying a phone or a tablet, it's time to realize that you can do without that screen, and what we call the second screen can now be the primary screen. And suddenly, you are free of all these constraints, and your event can take place in the most unconventional space and the most stimulating format. For example, what we have shared on that slide here is an event that took place in a Greek ancient theater with participants interacting with the speakers and slides being pushed through the app. And this is the moment to remember that in today's environment, context is often much more important than content.
Yeah, C2 Montreal is an event that I have written about for many years now, and I think they just do such a wonderful job of creating very thoughtful, immersive experiences. When I talked to them earlier this year, they were talking about how they actually analyze research on human behavior and learning before they develop the activities for their annual event. And every one of the activities is based on the concept of challenging the attendees to think in new ways. So this year, one of the most talked about activities was called the Sky Lab. And it is where the guests were invited to sit in chairs that were then suspended 20 feet off the ground to have discussions about business issues. And yes, it looked really cool. The people were also surrounded. They were not only hanging from the ceiling, but they were surrounded by a 360-degree cylindrical projection surface. But it was done for a reason. It was to take people out of their comfort zones, to break down barriers, and to create meaningful dialogue.
Well, that is very cool, Mitra. I wish I could go and visit it.
Yeah, it's the one that everybody seems to talk about, that event, for sure. So let's move on now. Our third trend that we want to discuss is virtual and hybrid experiences. Social media and the internet have allowed us to expand our reach, to touch people in other cities, other states, even other countries. Yeah, and I remember when we were first starting to see events experiment with streaming several years ago, there was so much fear around that topic. There was so much fear that it would cannibalize the face-to-face event. That was the word that we kept hearing. And the thinking was, if we offer the option for people to watch online, maybe they won't come in person. But now we know that what we have seen is that is not the case. Time and time again, as we talk to events who have added streaming components and hybrid components, they say that it has actually improved their face-to-face event and developed more of an interest in it.
All right. So let's go through some of the trends here. And, as you pointed out, virtual and hybrid meetings have witnessed a widespread adoption over the past years. I mean, today we have right now 159, I believe, professionals who are watching this webinar, which is a great example on how we can connect together without attending in person. However, when we look at the feedback from participants will often cite the limited opportunities to interact. And they, of course, referring to interactions with the speakers, but also interactions with other participants. So these are the two trends that we're going to witness over the next 12 months. The first trend is that interactive options for virtual events are going to be much more generalized. Said otherwise, people expect to share content, to capture feedback, to leverage user-generated content to steer the conversation, and there are many ways to make sure that your virtual event does not turn into a one-way webcast. Now, a second trend, with hybrid meetings or hybrid events becoming more and more popular, we do see much more often small hubs of participants connecting together for a single virtual event. And this is an opportunity to put everyone under the same roof and create individual connections amongst participants, just like if they were meeting face-to-face.
Yeah, those are great points. But before we move on, I just want to take a quick moment to remind everyone, please don't forget to submit your questions in the Q&A box. We're very curious to know what you might want a little more detail about. Obviously, there's a lot of content here, so please feel free to send those questions in right there in that Q&A box. So, relating to virtual and hybrid, I think it's important to remember that the people who are not able to attend, the ones who may watch online, could in fact become your biggest advocates. And of course, if your virtual experience is well done, it will spur some of those people to attend in person the following year. So that's why your online component cannot be a second thought. Make it interactive, create an experience that shows that online audience that you value them. That gets back again to that feeling of, valuing their time, their effort, their money to be participating. Think about creating opportunities for your online attendees to interact, and whether that's a dedicated chat room Or kind of relating, Pierre, to what you were just talking about, putting people under the same roof, I know that Google does that for its annual I.O. developer conference. Google helps to host events in cities all around the world where people are gathering to watch the stream together. And they, help to make those events feel connected to the actual developer conference that is taking place over there in Northern California.
Okay, so in practice, what can we do? Well, Mitra, there are 2 tips that I would like to flag today. And the first is, because there's so many different ways of running those hybrid and virtual meetings, the first tip is that you should be designing what we call a differentiated user experience based on the participant type. So, for example, if you are a virtual participant, you probably will be sitting at your office using your desktop computer and most likely on a web browser. So we need to make sure we equip these participants with the right tools. And that means a streaming screen. They need to have sound. They need to be able to see slides. They need to have access to the content on the side. And they also need to access polling and Q&A as a back channel. But then you have other people attending. In a hybrid scenario, most likely you would have participants sitting in one of the hubs, and they're most likely watching one of the streaming screens. In this case, a mobile app is the perfect companion, and of course they'll expect to be seamlessly integrating the Q&A and the live polling with the other virtual participants. Now, a second tip, and that sort of refers back to the point you just made on planning your content. Because you have a complete lack of context and you have possible distractions, especially if you're attending remotely, your virtual events have to be, by nature, even more engaging than face-to-face meetings. So what we have learned from our clients, and especially in the pharmaceutical space where we are serving the top 10 pharma companies worldwide, we found out that we, as a rule of thumb, we should at least plan for a 30% interactive time out of the total speaking time with Q&A, polling, and other interactive formats. And this is more than face-to-face meetings where we typically have a 15 to 20% interactive time. Now, because of the possible delays and response times, make sure to keep these interactions simple and do not over-engineer your interactive moments. So in a way, virtual and hybrid events are becoming much more like face-to-face meetings.
Okay, wonderful. Well, let's move on now to our 4th trend, and that is collaboration. This relates to breaking down silos and fostering that collaboration, whether that is in your workplace as you are planning events or in the experience that you're trying to create for your attendees. A Gartner report recently stated that 44% of employees want to enable more new and effective ways of working in a digital workplace. And events in isolation are not worth much either, and that's why technology that fosters collaboration is so hot right now.
Well, Mitra, the thing is that with the advent of this digital workplace, we find out that people want creative new ways of collaborating, both in person and online. And you were just citing Gartner, who also said that by 2022, about 70% of these software interaction in enterprise will occur on mobile devices. So people want those interactions to happen differently, but they also want them to be much more mobile and fluid. And events are no different. Actually, events are the perfect lab for experimenting with these new ways of working, which will be hitting the workplace in a couple of years. And what do people want? They want collaboration. They want small group. They want freedom of content. They want to bring their own devices. They want to be able to collaborate anytime, anywhere, together in fluid and virtual teams. And you can recreate this environment in your events. And your team will crave for this stimulating learning setting.
Yeah, I mean, certainly working in a bubble doesn't allow for innovation. And if your attendees are spending all of their time at your event really alone in the crowd without a chance to discuss what they're learning with each other, that's really a missed opportunity. So I think room setups are crucial. Think about whether a new layout, for example, instead of theater style, maybe using lounge furniture in a small configuration, will foster more dialogue. And, it's crucial to interact with colleagues, industry experts, and other people who can stimulate your mind.
So, as we just saw, your event is going to be the perfect place for your teams to experiment new ways of working. And you can combine this experimentation with the kickoff of a new initiative, a new plan, or a different strategy. And what you can do is to give a real-life challenge for your participants to solve during the meeting. So this is what 250 executives from GE have done over the course of 2 days. During the first day, participants have been allocated into groups, each assigned with a number of challenges. For example, reducing costs, simplifying processes, boosting innovation. And together in the groups and supported by mobile technology, executives have been discussing, brainstorming, shortlisting, voting, and framing their best ideas. The process will at one point expand into 350 ideas and finally being consolidated into 25 concepts. During the second part of the event, participants will then get allocated in each of these 25 initiative groups and will be tasked with designing an action and communication plan to cascade back to their teams upon their return. So, Mitra, what we have seen is that across our client base, we do have industry leaders who are consistently allocating over 40% of their leadership meeting time for such activities. And these are fostering collaboration, breaking silos, and encouraging people to connect and learn from each other. And this is what people really want to get out of your event. Now, just to expand a little bit on this, at SpotMe, we do also like to eat our own dog food. So we use apps during our team quarterly meetings, but also during our leadership meetings. And in this particular example, we're using a model called the Business Model Canvas, and we use it to collect ideas, to share them across our team, and to make decisions on which initiative is going to be implemented. But also, a key trend that we have noted over the past 12 months is to actually extend that conversation beyond the event itself. And by using so-called engagement platform applications, the discussions will continue on forums, activity feeds, and surveys, and will naturally feed into your next meeting. Now, your participants will be in the driving seat and will be more engaged than ever. And so, there will be a day when meetings will not be presentations after presentation, and content won't be created by event organizers, but instead by participants.
Thank you to Pierre, first of all. These trends will definitely stick around for 2018 and beyond as technology continues to transform live experiences. So, Pierre, can you run us through some of the key takeaways from today's talk?
Yeah, absolutely. I can do this fairly quickly. I mean, the first is, personalization, think of it as a journey. This is not just a moment, this is a journey, and that's a way for you to tailor the journey to make it memorable for your participants. Now, the second thing is you need to leverage that space, especially that screen space that you have in your room, for creating and reflecting conversations that your participants want to have. Now, if you're going into the virtual and hybrid world, make sure you open it up to everyone, and you open it up not only for them to watch a webcast, but for your people and your participants to actually contribute. Give them a voice through Q&A and polling, and much more than you will do in a face-to-face meeting. And finally, engage your leaders and your participants into a real collaboration exercise. And you can do this during your event, but you can also extend this beyond your event with engagement platforms.
Excellent. Thank you so much to both of you. This has been an incredible presentation. I know I've been drafting down notes and paying attention to the questions as they've rolled in. Please feel free to continue to add questions into the question box on your lower left-hand screen, and if we have time, we should be able to include those questions before the end. So first question, in the beginning of the presentation, Pierre, when you were speaking about the questions and ask many questions of your participants so that you get more data on them. Is there a magic number to those questions? How many questions are too many when you're asking for information?
Well, I think it depends on the context. I mean, if you are running a leadership meeting, you may have different, goals if you are hosting an annual meeting with some of your best customers. I think it all depends, but at the core, one of the easiest questions is, what are the wants and what are the haves that you can bring to a meeting? And said otherwise, you're just asking people, what do you bring to it? What is your expertise? And what do you want to learn? And you should try to categorize this in predefined fields, and that will really help you understanding what people are here for. In general, I would not recommend asking more than 3 questions, because then you will have question fatigue, and you will probably have a low adoption rate of that particular registration questionnaire.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay, another question that we have. Are there specific types of events that lend themselves best to a virtual component?
Yeah, so most of the virtual and hybrid events that we do, they are breaking up in 2 categories. One is what we would call the virtual expert forums, and this is usually an all virtual type of meetings where you would have a couple of speakers like today and a panel of speakers, and then all participants are attending remotely. And then another format that we see in the same space is what we call a town hall, where you would have a certain fraction, usually the majority of the audience attending in person, and then the rest of the audience attending virtually or remotely. This is particularly true for internal meetings, for leadership meetings, or for all-hands company meetings.
Got it. Great. So I think our not-for-profit and philanthropic attendees are chiming in, and they're asking, sort of speaking to that the trends that have been spoken to seem to be more about brainstorming and/or corporate type events. And how do you utilize and/or expand these trends to a fundraising type of an event?
Yeah, if we talk about nonprofit, and I think I briefly mentioned that, if you do have a lot of content that you wanted to share, especially for, scientific and medical conferences, this is very natural that you go into personalization. And it's absolutely important that there's so much content, and it's all very interesting, but there's so much of it that people really can't make sense of it. And so tools like, personalization or even, collaboration will help you pinpoint the exact content that you need and that will make sense for you. So I think this is quite important. Virtual meetings, I see a lot of questions around the cost of this. Virtual meetings, I don't need to explain this a lot. That will help you, running your event at a fraction of the cost. What's interesting is that I see that people probably from the nonprofit world are saying, oh, this looks good, this seems very exciting, but it also is probably very expensive. And that will also bring me to the main obstacles of running, these trends in the future. And the primary obstacle that we see is certainly not the cost, but it's more the courage that it takes, especially from your leadership, to go and try out these new formats. Because what we haven't really discussed is that all these trends, what they imply is that they imply a little bit of a loss of control from the people who actually own the event. And in reality, yes, you're giving out the keys of your event to your attendees, but at the same time, you can do this in a smart way where you would have, a little bit of a backdoor, and at the end of it, you can still pull the strings and control what's going to happen.
I think perhaps that's a good dovetail into another question, that is, how do you make these things a reality when there isn't a budget in place, though, to create these experiences for attendees? Do you have suggestions for low-tech and or other ways to foster personalization at the event?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a misconception that because it's interactive, it has to be expensive. I think what I just said earlier is that most people will often, say, oh, this requires extremely complicated tech. Most of the examples that I shared, they actually are based on an application module called the Q&A, And that is like the most basic functionality that pretty much any even app or even webinar application will provide, where people can submit questions. And yet, this is completely underutilized. So it's not because it looks fancy and elaborate that it is expensive. And my advice is, try it. And again, what I see most often as an obstacle is not much the cost, but it's more like how much are we ready to try out, and who are the people we need to convince to try it, and take a bit of a leap of faith so that we can experiment with those new formats.
Got it. Moving just into something a little bit different. This speaks to use as sort of second screen in lieu of first screen. So if you're using your second screen first and perhaps forego, I see this also as a cost savings measure at an event. Mm-hmm. Instead of opting into AV and having to use your provider, you can have your second screen go first. Do you say, or is there a limit of the amount of people that you would encourage to do this? And are we at a point now in almost 2018 where we believe everyone in the audience has come with a smartphone device, that you do not need to think about that person who doesn't have a phone and therefore couldn't participate? Are we past that at this point?
Yeah, so you're raising the point of what's the adoption of the second screen altogether. And I think we have to distinguish between two things. The one is the technical adoption, and that is the question, who does not have a phone and who is going to a conference? And the response to that is nobody, right? I think the gap that has to be resolved is that even though everyone's owned or has a phone, it doesn't mean that everyone has installed it. It doesn't mean that the tech is easy enough for the people to actually install it. It doesn't mean that people are going to actually take the time to do it. And it's interesting because one of the things that we do to make sure that we have 100% adoption is that we still provide, as a sort of a side business, we still provide loaner devices with iPads and iPods. And that business doesn't want to die. Even though everyone has one of these in their hands, there's still a strong desire for some of our customers to make sure that we equip every single participant with an iPad. Certainly not the majority of events, but that's the only guarantee that everyone will have the app installed. So I think it's going to be, to answer your question, I think today we're getting to 100% installed base. And when you look at apps and people who are actually using it, you will see all numbers from, 60% to 99.9%. I mean, my guess would be rather in the 90%. The thing is that if you take away the main screen, if you remove it, people won't have a choice. And, some people will complain and will say, well, I felt excluded. But in reality, everyone knows that they have this phone in their hands and they could just install this app and they could just watch it. So in a way, I think people have been a little bit maybe spoiled. And, by running those experiments, you will accelerate the adoption.
I think that's truly fascinating. So interesting, again, we're jumping a little all over the place, but how do you guarantee participants' data privacy while delivering this, mix of personalization and recommendations? Yeah, so that's a key question. It's a very hot question in Europe now because, as you may have heard, there's a new piece of legislation that is being introduced, and that will actually be affecting event organizers in the United States. Now, to answer your question, it's all about the consent, right? Whenever you are collecting or processing or storing personal data, first of all, you need to ask explicit authorization to the person you're doing this to. Said otherwise, when you log into the website, the app, the system, you need to have a privacy policy that explains very clearly what is the intent, why are we doing this, and what are we doing? What data are we collecting? Are we tracking your location? Are we collecting, all the actions that you're doing through the website or through the app, and why we're doing this? Because one of the key concepts behind privacy is that you should not be collecting data that you don't need. Now, if your app or your website is offering recommendations, your participant will understand that they need to be tracked in order to be offered
valuable recommendations. And most people will agree with that. And maybe 5% or 10% will opt out, and maybe 1% will opt out completely from your app. So it's all about letting your people, your participants, do informed decision and make it clear what is the intent. And then at the end of the day, most of your participants will be okay with that.
Understood. So we're getting asked questions. How can this information be translated and used? Both for we have one asking for experiential events, and we have someone asking on how to apply these trends to a festival setting. Perhaps examples of the ideas set forth in perhaps either experiential and or festival.
Yeah, so this is a little bit outside of my, let's say, area of expertise, but I mean, creating immersive experiences is certainly something that will go, into this type of events. And I know we sort of implied that, being immersive doesn't mean VR or AR. I mean, AR is finally, for events, is finally delivering on its promise. So what we see, past the hype, where everyone is trying, some sort of a Pokemon Go type of app. We past the hype. Now we're seeing this plateau of productivity hitting AR applications. So one of the trends that we see now is AR being used as a replacement for the infamous QR codes, for example. So if you want to trigger content based on a certain location or a certain context, this is where AR could be extremely useful. This is also a great way to make it different, to provide additional information. And I think one of the key points here is that you can provide information with a context, and this is what AR is extremely good at.
Can I just jump in real quick with a comment related to that? I think there definitely are applications for festivals and things such as that, and we cover and see a lot of examples with that. And I think Coachella comes to mind and some others that are doing some innovative things. I just recently heard about the idea of, with AR, for example, suppose you're at a big festival of some sort, and as the person walking around the event, maybe there's a stage in front of you and you're wondering who's going to be performing next, and you're able to hold your phone up toward that stage, and on your phone screen, you see the list of who's coming up to perform. So that's the kind of ways that AR can be used. It augments your actual real view of what is around you with useful information, hopefully.
Yeah, Mitra, I've actually also seen a technology that's launching to allow exhibitors to participate in sort of a click here, if you will, to see additional catalog offerings, and sort of on the supplier side to change what their booth presence would be at a particular show. That would also apply to a festival type setting.
Right, right. It eliminates the need to bring as much stuff with you, let's say, if you can show it in that way.
I think that we're all right, and probably I've seen we've had a comment as well about battery life and phones getting filled, that we must be supplying charging stations and ample opportunity for people to keep their phones charged at all times at these events. The more we ask for them to hold on it, the more we must make sure that there's plugs available to keep the charge up.
No, I saw that comment, and that's very true. I think there are a couple of things here. I don't think, I think we need to make sure in our design, when we're designing the event, that not everything is going to revolve around the phone. Because if that's the case, then probably people would be better off staying home, right? We can stream slides on the phone, but I don't think that every session needs to have slides to be streamed. So that's probably the first comment. The second is there is a huge technology advance that has been made here. And the sort of first generation of streaming / engagement technologies was not really optimized. And what we see now, and it's actually a good question to ask when you are evaluating technology, what's the impact on battery life and how much optimizations have you made into this?
I'm not sure, I'll be honest, Pierre, if someone even gave me their answer that I would understand what they were saying. But it's definitely a question I think we'll add to our list when evaluating technology for BizBash events, for sure. So a little different direction, but what would you recommend to event organizers do to continue the engagement after the event is over? How do you prolong the life of your event? I think that's the age-old question that all of us want to know. How do you keep up the hype and excitement after the event is closed?
That's the $20 million
question, exactly.
Yeah, right. And unfortunately, the answer is no. Or fortunately, I don't know. The answer is not about the tech. It's as far as I see this is all about having a purpose for what you are trying to create after your event. I mean, we do have a lot of clients coming to us, and no offense, but, just the purpose of extending the conversation, that's not enough, right? You need to have a common goal. You need to create a common goal. You need to have a group of people who actually share the same interest and the same willingness to achieve that common goal. So whether this is artificial, whether this is artificially created during the event, or whether this is something that is true because they're part of the same focus group, or maybe they're part of the same department, or maybe they're part of the same project. And where we have seen those engagement platforms succeeding the most is when they were like a group of distributed people, meaning that they're not at the same place physically, and yet they are part of the same project. And we've seen completely exotic type of projects. I mean, one of my favorite projects is we actually worked with people within clinical investigators who are working on clinical trials, and these are happening in hospitals around the world, run by the trial is run by the same pharma company, and yet you have all those people in those different hospitals that they need to work together to get this drug approved by the FDA. And this is where it's very natural that the conversation extends after the meeting into a platform, an app, or a website where we are trying to create something together. So my answer to this is you need to have a goal. You need to have a common goal. Now, there are some other tips that we have sort of learned in the process. When you are on site, when you are face-to-face, this is a great place to identify the people who are most willing to contribute and to shape your community after your face-to-face event. We call these people the little gems. And what you do is that you identify those people. They're easy to identify because they always have questions on site. They always have ideas. They always want to speak, right? So what you do is that you scout for these guys on site, and then you ask them to reconnect later on, maybe 1 month after the event, and you ask them to participate and contribute to content, like a short video, for example, that could be posted on the activity feed of the engagement platform post-meeting. And this is a great way to sort of already plan for your content strategy post-meeting and involving members of the community during the on-site event.
That's a great suggestion and a great idea. I do have, I believe, one more question, and it relates back to the word clouds and some of the I forget what some of the other examples were for that which you could project up on a screen to show that real-time interaction or response, if you will. What type of technology is required for that? Do you need to be on any separate type of router, or is simple Wi-Fi hooked up to the machine monitoring this sort of good enough?
I mean, nowadays most of these technology actually rely on cloud technology. So, I mean, any cloud or SaaS app, will usually do a good job. Now, one thing you need to be careful is when you have, 600 people into the same room, and, the machine that is projecting or displaying that word cloud is connected to the cloud itself, well, you need to make sure that connection to the cloud doesn't fail. Otherwise, you're just going to be looking at an empty screen. So, again, when you are evaluating your providers, make sure to ask those questions. Some of them provide on-site servers that provide extra security or closed networks. This, of course, this comes with a price, but this is an element you need to factor in your decision making.
Understood. We did get a question, and I want to share it. It's, do you believe that the virtual screening will become more relevant eventually than the mobile app?
Well, I don't necessarily see those two as different. I mean, in my opinion, at the end of the day, these two should be merging to some extent. I don't see, the app as just being the place where you put the agenda and where you do Q&A and polling, and the virtual screen, where you watch your content. I see no reason why they don't coexist and eventually merge. I think this will be in every participant's best interest.
Wonderful. Understood. So I think with that, we've gotten to most of the questions. And at this point, I really wish to thank Pierre and Mitra so much for their insightful presentation. And there were so many great ideas, tips, and tricks. And this discussion at the end has been really enlightening. So thank you to everyone for joining us for another webinar. We wish you all a happy and healthy holiday season. And we look forward to our webinar series kicking back off again in 2018. Thank you so much.